Mikhail Gorbachev and Boris Yeltsin eventually emerge as the man that we in the United States are going to have to deal with. I say an old friend, more accurately an old acquaintance I used to cover when he was campaigning to become president of the United States. Starting back when he was vice president, Richard Nixon mixed it up with whoever was leading the Soviet Union at the time. Back in 1959, it was Nikita Khrushchev who headed out with him in that famous kitchen debate in Moscow. Through all the subsequent Soviet regimes, he has had as good a fix as anyone on Soviet politics. And when he goes there, he has no trouble getting right to the top. On this trip, when he wasn't with Gorbachev or Yeltsin, he was out there getting the word from their constituents. And what did they tell him about Mikhail Gorbachev?
They said that he was weak. They said he was indecisive. They said he was a talker rather than a doer. One of them described him, incidentally, as a brutal wimp. Another one described him with a four-letter word that begins with the letter S. This was all done in a room which could have been bugged. And as you know, I'm somewhat sensitive about that sort of a room. What we forget about Gorbachev is that he's able to turn 180 degrees, and people will forget what he has said the day before or even the year before. Here's a man that is capable of turning around in midair, and that is his only hope. If he does not turn back to reforms, by sticking with reactionaries, he will keep his power, but he will risk his place in history.
And this is the man who could push Gorbachev off the world stage, Boris Yeltsin. Nixon had never met him before, but he came away impressed. He was not what he expected.
I had the impression from what I had read and heard in the media and what I heard even from some of those who briefed me from the Foreign Service and the rest, that this man was a mental lightweight, that he was also tended to drink too much and to be a womanizer. That doesn't seem to be a particular liability, incidentally, in the Soviet Union. But in any event, I met this man and I found that he was a formidable political personality. He's no mental lightweight. We talked for over an hour. He didn't have a note in front of him. We covered the world, and he handled himself extremely well.
And a big, attractive,
he is
even charismatic.
Yeah, they say he chases women. Let me tell you, I'll bet women chase him because he has that animal magnetism. Yeltsin is one who relates to people. Relates to them because he likes people. He moves with them. The reason that they underestimate Yeltsin is they put too much emphasis on style rather than substance. They did the same with Khrushchev. They thought that this man who wore the floppy hats, who spoke bad Russian, who drank too much, was a lightweight. Khrushchev had the fastest reaction time of any leader I have met in 43 years on the world stage. Really? Exactly. So don't judge people by the clothes they wear, by the schools they've gone to. You judge a Yeltsin by what he stands for. You judge him by how he is able to move people.
All right, translate this for us. What does that mean for leadership in the Soviet Union? Is he absolutely stymied beyond the presidency of the Russian Federation?
Not stymied, because that's the way to power. I asked Yeltsin whether or not he was really one who was competing with Gorbachev. He said, oh no, I don't want that position. And the reason he doesn't want it, he would never get it. Can you imagine the KGB and the Communist Party and the military-industrial complex supporting Boris Yeltsin, who says, I repudiate communism, who says I would give up the Baltics, give them independence right at the present time, who told me I would cut off all aid to Cuba, all aid to Afghanistan. These are things that Gorbachev will not do. This man will never be selected by the current hardline reactionary leadership who control power at the present time. Incidentally, I asked Yeltsin, I said, why don't you and Gorbachev get together? Is it too late? And Yeltsin thought for a moment, and then he raised his fingers. He says, there's about that much chance we can get together. But he said, I'm afraid he's missed the boat, because he is joined now and is surrounded by the reactionaries.
I get the feeling that Richard Nixon believes that Mikhail Gorbachev has missed the boat.
He has missed the boat. I think he's made a fundamental error in turning to the reactionaries in order to keep power, when by continuing to work with the reformers, he could make a new Soviet Union. I'll tell you what we're seeing today in the Soviet Union, Mike. What we're witnessing is one of those great moments in history. We're witnessing either the death throes of a failed revolution, communism, or the birth pangs of a new revolution, freedom. And I think we're going to come down on the side of freedom. Let me put it another way. I remember so vividly when we were having our famous kitchen debate in 1959 with Khrushchev.
7 years from now, we will be on the same level of achievements as America. In the following years, we shall continue to surge ahead. And when we shall overtake you at the crossroads, we shall greet you. After that, if you wish, we can stop and tell you, please follow us.
He punched me in the chest with his finger and he said, your grandchildren will live under communism.
Yeah.
Well, I didn't punch him in the chest, but I responded as you would expect me to. I said, your grandchildren will live in freedom. Looking back, I'm sure he believed that what he said would happen. Today, I will say categorically, I believe Khrushchev's grandchildren will live under freedom.
Mr. President, is there a Soviet Union as a country? This is a vast oversimplification. But it has occurred to me that the Soviet Union is really the Communist Party. And the Communist Party is discredited. Take away the party, and you've got the Baltics over here who don't want to be part of that country. You've got Georgia that doesn't want to be part of the country, nor does Moldavia. And Boris Yeltsin, Russia, the Russian Federation of which he is president, would like to go it alone. There is no country except for the party, or am I wrong?
You're absolutely right, Mike. The glue that held the Soviet Union together was the communist idea. So what has happened is that communism has been totally discredited as a result of Gorbachev's reforms of opening up the eyes of the Soviet people, letting them see their past, and also letting them to look across what was the Iron Curtain into the West,
and yet
to see what they could have.
And yet he doesn't seem to have the wit, that's not the word, the understanding to say, okay, communism is dead. I am no longer a communist. Yeltsin has given up communism.
That's right. And this is the Gorbachev problem. We have to remember that it would require him to cut his umbilical cord to that great ideology which bore him into life in the first place.
Although the former president said he wanted to limit our discussion to his trip to the Soviet Union, I pressed him on a couple of other issues as well, like the aftermath of the Gulf War and the plight of the Kurds.
Now the victory is won. And now the question comes, what do you do about the victims of victory? The great difficulty historically is not winning wars for the United States, but winning the peace. And one of the fallouts of this war is the problem of the Kurds, and the problem that Saddam Hussein, left in power, even though he has been effectively, I would say, militarily castrated, is still able to wreak his vengeance on these people who dared to rebel against him.
Let me give you a proposition. You're President of the United States, and you hear that Saddam Hussein is willing to leave Iraq, like the Shah left Iran, like Somoza left Nicaragua, if he is not prosecuted when he goes into exile. You buy the deal?
I would say that I would be greatly tempted. I would be greatly tempted because he's an international menace. Over a period of time, unless his own people remove him, his own generals, with his oil revenues, despite all the restrictions that are placed upon him, he, in a period of 5 years, he's a relatively young man, will again be a threat to peace and stability in the area. If I could find a way to get him out of there, even putting a contract out on him, if the CIA still did that sort of a thing, assuming it ever did, I would be for it.
You don't watch a lot of television, but you read the papers, I'll bet, every day. Well, over the last couple of days, it was impossible to miss talk about the Kennedys and talk about the Reagans. You sit there and you watch your television set, you read it in the papers. What do you think? What does Richard Nixon think about the coverage of the Kennedys and the Reagans?
Well, I thought the coverage of the whole Reagan book was really revolting. Second, as far as the Kennedy thing is concerned, I think it titillates everybody, but I don't think it's particularly important.
You feel sorry for these people?
Let me separate first the Kennedy incident. The Kennedy incident, which involved apparently some sort of sexapade down in that little pocket of poverty called Palm Beach. and the situation with regard to the Reagans, they're altogether different. President Reagan was president for 8 years. Nancy Reagan was first lady for 8 years. And I just don't believe in books that muckrake and destroy what most of us thought about them while they were there. They may have made mistakes in the past, but I didn't like the book on Lyndon Johnson, where they virtually destroyed him. Needless to say, some of those on me I can't say anything about, because I'm fair game.
Final question. Who would have thought that Richard Nixon would have been sitting in 1991, and America is listening, and listening very carefully to, forgive me, sir, a rehabilitated Richard Nixon?
Well, rehabilitation has not been my goal, as many of my critics would suggest, and even some of my supporters. What I've been interested in all my life, as you well know, because you covered me for many, many years, is basically what can be done to make a difference in the world, particularly on the great issue of war and peace. And that is my satisfaction, not the fact that maybe some of the columnists, some of your friends in television, would say, well, the SOB is rehabilitating himself again. But they can have one satisfaction. Since I have been elected to the presidency twice, Ronald Reagan and I are the only two males over the age of 35 that can't be elected president of the United States.